Hi and welcome back. In this video, as we're approaching the end of the course, I wanted to show you a bit more how I work on my day-to-day. What you've seen so far is me working with a setup that is, I think, quite good for recording. But you've not seen the actual way that I work at my computer every day. So I thought it may be interesting to show you how I go about doing my job, just in case you want to replicate some of these things if you find them interesting. Now, normally, you'll see me and many other software engineers coding with a dark theme. This is a white theme, and right now it's getting a bit late. You can see the time up on the top right. It's 8:30 at night. Using a white theme at this time of the day is actually not the nicest thing to use. So I normally use a dark theme, and I find it's just a bit more readable. And also, I just find the colors, I said that very weirdly, I find the colors pop a bit more. So things like keywords and things like that are just a bit more visible when you're using a dark theme. So what I normally do is I have a different theme. Now, you can see that the theme here is default in PyCharm when you open the settings and you go to Appearance. I normally use in PyCharm a darkular theme. So you can apply that, and then you can see immediately that we have sort of changed quite a bit. We are now in a dark mode. You can see the font has changed as well, and you probably can't see it as well because it's much smaller. Of course, when I'm recording, I use a huge font, just so you guys can see it very easily. But when I'm working, I don't use a huge font like that. But let's go over to the preferences once again, and I'll show you what I do use in the editor and in font. So in the color scheme here, you can see that I've got my own custom scheme, which is called Darkular Jose. That's just for me. And in here, I've overridden quite a few things. In code, possibly. Let me go and find it again. Font here. Oh, there you go. Color scheme font. I'm using, frequently I use a font called Essential Pragmata Pro. That depends, or whether I use this font or not, depends on the size of my screen. So I don't actually use PyCharm all that often when I'm working at this computer. I use it all the time at work. But when I'm working at this computer at home, I've stopped using PyCharm a bit more just because it's a bit too heavy duty for the things I do when I'm in my free time. So if I'm using a small screen, like a laptop, which I frequently do, I'll use Essential Pragmata Pro. Essential Pragmata Pro is a paid font, but I find it really readable when it's small, and also because it's a skinny font, it is taller than it is wide. It is very good for a small screen. You can fit more characters on a small screen, and you can still read it nicely. So Essential Pragmata Pro, paid font, but very nice for small screens. When I'm using a larger screen, like I am doing right now for recording, I would actually not use Essential Pragmata Pro, I would use Fira Code. So this is the font I use normally on my day-to-day when I am at home. So if we apply that, you can see that it looks a bit different. Now, one of the reasons I've stopped using PyCharm at home is because it's too heavy duty. And another reason is that this font looks just a little bit weird in my eyes. The spacing between the letters is a bit too much. And in PyCharm, you cannot actually change that, which is a little bit annoying. PyCharm does have the tendency of adding too much space between letters. So I'll go into in a moment into what I do to avoid that. So this is the font that I normally use. Feel free to use that. Fira Code is a free font. You can download it and you can use it. It's up to you. One of the good things about Fira Code is the font ligatures. So if you want to enable them, just press Enable Font Ligatures and then you can press OK. And then you'll get a few things that change in the font. For example, if you type equal greater than, you'll get this little arrow instead of two separate symbols. Similarly, if you type greater than or equal to in Python, so that's these two characters together, you get this mathematical symbol for greater than or equal to. So I quite like these symbols. Some people don't like them. So Fira Code does that for you if you enable the font ligatures. And if that's something you want to do, you can use this font as well. And the other things are the language defaults, sort of the colors for things. And I've modified some of these colors so that keywords are orange I just find they pop much more easily and they're very readable like that. And of course, a few other changes here as well, like the underlines and so forth. Feel free to change these to match your own style and what you like as well. It took me quite a while to find a color scheme for PyCharm that I really liked, but I've actually not changed this one in a long time. So I do like it, but PyCharm adds a bit too much spacing between letters, so normally I would use the other font, Essential Pragmata Pro, on particularly a small screen if I was using PyCharm. But at home, I am not using PyCharm anymore, and I'm also not using Essential Pragmata Pro, really, because I have two large screens. And so I'm using Visual Studio Code that actually you can see just here. Here are my notes for the last few lectures. You can see that I've got a split screen there. And here I'm using Fira code as well, with also a dark theme, quite a nice theme here. And this is what I normally code in when I'm working on course material or small applications like I do at home. I use Visual Studio Code. I find it's quite straightforward to use. And I also use Visual Studio Code at work when I'm working on JavaScript applications, just because it works very nicely for that. And I find just the structure of JavaScript applications and the use of Fira code helps with that. Using Fira code and PyCharm can be a bit more tricky because of the letter spacing. So that's it. In terms of the settings in Visual Studio Code, I have a few extensions installed, and you can see them here. I have a bunch of them, but really the most important ones for me are ESLint, which integrates a linter into JavaScript code, very much like PyLint for Python. You've got ESLint for JavaScript. You've got Flow language, which adds types to JavaScript. And then you've got a few other things here that may be more interesting to you, like Jinja, which allows us to look at Jinja code, which is used in Flask. I've got Python, which is an extension that allows you to write Python code, and it adds things like linting, debugging, and so forth into Visual Studio Code, which is very useful. And also something I do like is VS Code icons. When you go back to your Explorer here, that's what it's called, you can see little icons beside the files, and that just sort of helps identify them a bit nicer. I generally like the look of Visual Studio Code a bit more than I do of PyCharm, but the PyCharm debugger is much more powerful than anything I've managed to use in Visual Studio Code. So when I'm working in Python, I use PyCharm because of the debugger almost exclusively. When I'm working in JavaScript, because the debugging capabilities are much worse, it doesn't really matter which one I use, so I tend to prefer Visual Studio Code. And that's it. Visual Studio Code also gives you a few nice things, like it's a pretty nice search. The Git source control is quite powerful and quite nice to use. And then it's got a debugger as well, but as I said, with JavaScript it's not so fantastic, so I tend not to use it all that often. The theme, I think, is called, I'm not sure what it's called actually, but I will put a wee link to the sort of settings that I'm using here, just in case you want to give it a go as well. Down here in Visual Studio Code, you've also got a terminal, so you don't have to open a separate application, and frequently I use this terminal here to do things, like run my Python apps or my linter or whatever. So it's pretty nice to have that in here as well. Anyway, that's it for this video. Just wanted to show you what I normally work with, and paired with these two programs that I use for software development, I also use, of course, Slack as a communication tool to talk with my teammates, and that's pretty much always running, and of course email as well to do wider company updates and things like that. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.